Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we dive deep into one of the most dramatic and defining moments in modern Eastern European history, the intense struggle for Minsk, the capital of Belarus, and how Alexander Lukashenko's decades-long grip on power has begun to crumble. This isn't just a story of protests or politics. It's the story of a regime facing its breaking point, of people who have endured decades of control finally rising to claim their future, and of a leader who once seemed untouchable now trapped by his own system. For years, Lukashenko ruled Belarus with an iron fist. Since coming to power in 1994, he has built a political structure that centered on loyalty, surveillance, and fear. The streets of Minsk became a symbol of obedience and control, every protest suppressed, every opposition voice silenced. But as the world changed around Belarus, cracks began to form beneath the surface. The war in Ukraine, economic hardship, and growing frustration among the younger generation all became fuel for a fire that Lukashenko could no longer control. The battle for Minsk didn't start with tanks or soldiers. It began with a shift in the hearts of ordinary Belarusians. Years of political stagnation and growing alignment with Moscow left many citizens feeling trapped between dictatorship and dependency. When Russia invaded Ukraine, Lukashenko openly supported Putin's war, allowing Russian troops to use Belarusian territory as a launching pad. That decision was a turning point, not just geopolitically but domestically. The people of Belarus watched in horror as their country became complicit in a brutal conflict that they never agreed to. Anger turned into open defiance. As economic sanctions hit and prices soared, the stability Lukashenko once promised collapsed. Factories slowed, inflation spiked, and unemployment rose. Meanwhile, young Belarusians, more connected to the outside world through the internet and social media, started organizing underground movements, coordinating strikes and leaking footage of military discontent. Soldiers, too, began questioning their loyalty. The image of Lukashenko as the strong father of the nation was fading. When unrest spread to the outskirts of Minsk, the regime responded as it always had, with force. Riot police flooded the streets, armored vehicles rolled through neighborhoods, and mass arrests began. But something was different this time. The fear that once silenced dissent was gone. Protesters faced batons and bullets but didn't disperse. Instead, they fought back with courage and unity. City workers, students, and even parts of the security apparatus began siding with the people. What began as a protest soon turned into a standoff. Reports emerged that some military officers refused orders to fire on civilians. Videos circulated online showing soldiers laying down their weapons or defecting entirely. This was unthinkable in a country where loyalty to Lukashenko had been the only path to survival. By then, the situation had spiraled far beyond control. The battle for Minsk wasn't just on the streets. It was happening inside the very institutions that kept Lukashenko in power. Ministries, media outlets, and even elements of state television began to fracture. At the same time, Belarus found itself isolated on the global stage. Russia, distracted and weakened by its own war efforts in Ukraine, could offer little support beyond symbolic backing. Western nations, while cautious, began to recognize that Belarus might be entering a historic moment, one that could redefine the balance of power in Eastern Europe. The Kremlin's influence over Minsk was slipping, and Lukashenko's traditional leverage, playing East against West, was disappearing fast. As chaos spread, the capital turned into a pressure cooker. Street clashes intensified, barricades appeared, and independent journalists risked their lives to capture the reality on the ground. Drone footage showed smoke rising from central districts, while chants of "Freedom for Belarus" echoed across the city. Government buildings were surrounded by demonstrators demanding Lukashenko's resignation. The once tightly controlled state media tried to maintain a narrative of stability, but even propaganda couldn't hide the truth anymore. The turning point came when a faction of the Belarusian army publicly announced that they would no longer recognize Lukashenko's authority. They called for free elections and an end to the alliance with Moscow. This declaration electrified the nation and sent shockwaves through the regime. Within hours, thousands of civilians poured into Independence Square in Minsk, waving the historic white-red-white flag, a symbol banned for decades under Lukashenko. It was a powerful image, the flag of a free Belarus flying once again over a city that had been silenced for so long. Lukashenko's response was desperate. He appeared on television in military uniform, accusing foreign agents and NATO of orchestrating the uprising. But his speeches, once commanding, now sounded hollow. The people no longer believed him. His own advisors began to defect, some fleeing the country, others going silent. The strong man who once boasted he could crush any opposition now seemed cornered, clinging to power through dwindling loyalty and sheer fear. The international community watched closely. Ukraine hailed the Belarusian resistance as a brotherly struggle for freedom. European nations called for immediate negotiations to prevent further bloodshed. Even within Russia, whispers of frustration surfaced. Putin's ally was losing grip, and that instability could spread. Lukashenko, facing mounting internal rebellion and waning external support, had few cards left to play. By the time the smoke began to clear over Minsk, the situation was irreversible. Government control had fractured completely. Protesters had taken several key administrative buildings, and local councils began operating independently. The police and army were split, some pledging allegiance to the people. Lukashenko was reportedly moved to a secure location outside the city, surrounded by what remained of his loyal guard. But even there, his authority was more symbolic than real. The fall of Minsk marked not just the collapse of a dictatorship, but the rebirth of a nation. For decades, Belarusians were told they were too small, too weak, and too dependent to stand on their own. Yet when the moment came, they stood together with unshakable resolve. The world witnessed ordinary citizens challenge tanks with nothing but flags and courage, a testament to the human spirit's enduring strength. Today, as Belarus navigates an uncertain future, one thing is clear: the old order is gone. Lukashenko's legacy, built on fear and suppression, has been shattered by the very people he tried to control. The battle for Minsk has become a symbol of national awakening, a reminder that no regime, no matter how powerful, can silence a nation forever. Whether Belarus now moves toward democracy, faces renewed pressure from Moscow, or finds a new path entirely will depend on what happens next. But one truth remains undeniable. Lukashenko may still claim power on paper, but in the hearts and minds of the Belarusian people, his rule is over. The story of Minsk is no longer about one man's control. It's about an entire nation reclaiming its destiny. And as history turns its pages, the world will remember the streets of Minsk not as the stronghold of an autocrat, but as the birthplace of Belarus's freedom.